It's the Brad Field Weather Podcast, underwritten by McAllen Construction. McAllen Construction, from the first dig to the last nail. And by Action Carpet and Floor Covering of Simsbury, a family-run business built for you. I am Dan Lovallo. He is meteorologist Brad Field. We are putting this podcast together on Friday, February the 21st. And all seems to be calm at the moment, although it's pretty downright cold, Brad Field.
Dan, it's been cold. We've had 4 consecutive days now where the temperature has stayed below freezing. So we are definitely in a cold Arctic stretch. Today it's going to be close. We'll probably make it 5 consecutive days where the temperature stays below freezing for the entire 24-hour period. But Dan, I want to start off with this. Last week on the podcast, we pointed to this past Thursday and said that, there was all kinds of potential on the weather map. Well, I just want to tell the folks, the listeners, the viewers, what happened. Well, last night I just looked at the observations. Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Virginia, extreme coastal North Carolina, northern North Carolina, all got between 12 and 18 inches of snow, Dan, and it was right down to the ocean. And some of the people that live in that area, Newport News, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, were calling it a once-in-a-lifetime experience, that they see snow of that magnitude. Now, from there, that 12 to 18 inches of snow tracked to the east and northeast and occurred out over the ocean about 100 to 200 miles southeast of Nantucket. So that's where the snow went. So, you look at something about a week out and you say there's potential for this to hit. Had that thing tracked 200 to 300 miles further to the west and northwest, we would be digging out this morning from 1 to 2 feet of snow. But it tracked 200 to 300 miles to the southeast of where we thought a week ago. And we look foolish. It's people are saying, where's the storm? There was no storm. Well, there was a storm. It just didn't hit us. So that's where that thing went. So today we are going to look at the next snow threat. So we'll get into that in just a minute.
Right, and I know you've got some climatology information first, but even before we get into that, I have to tell our audience, Brad, this is our 200th episode of the Brad Field Weather Podcast.
Where does the time go?
No kidding. I mean, we started this back in December of 2018, and here we are in February of 2025, still going strong.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is something, 200 episodes. And we want to thank our underwriters because they have been fantastic throughout all of this.
I think they've been with us pretty much since day one.
That's right. Yeah.
I remember your friend, Dan, the travel guy.
Yep.
I can't think of his
My
name.
buddy Rick Sinnott. Right.
Yeah, he sort of like got us going
That's
a little
right.
bit, and then McAllen jumped on, and Kevin and Stephen Blake at Action Carpet jumped on, and for a while there was Four Dads Pub in
That's
Granby, which no longer exists, but all of these entities. Thank you. Yeah, 200 episodes. Wow.
200 episodes. It's amazing. Well, as long as we're into numbers, I know you've got the climatology report. So what did you come up with?
Well, we were talking, Dan, the other day. I forgot. I think we were texting maybe. And you said, this seems to me like one of those old-fashioned winters. And I think where you're coming from, Dan, is I looked at this. We've had 15 consecutive days of snow cover now. And snow cover is defined as an inch or more of snow on undisturbed ground surfaces. So what do I mean by that? I mean, places where cars haven't run over it, where it hasn't been shoveled up or plowed up. So just in your open yard, for example, there's been at least an inch of snow cover for 15 consecutive days as measured at Bradley. Now, there are places perhaps out at your house, Dan, and other areas in Litchfield County or in the high spots of northern Connecticut or the high spots of western Connecticut where snow cover has existed longer than that. But, you start thinking about it. Today we'll definitely have snow cover. Tomorrow, the next day, the next day. So we're going to be up around at least 3 weeks of this consecutive stretch of snow on the ground. And we've had the 4 to 5 consecutive days where the temperature has stayed sub-freezing all day long. Now you think, well, that's not that big of a deal. Well, yeah, it sort of is. Because as you head into late February, Dan, I looked at the stats for today, for Friday, February 21st. The normal high temperature today is 40. So we're leaving the 30s behind us in terms of what's average and what's normal. So, if we don't hit 32 today, which I don't think we will, we'll be right around there, that'll be 8 degrees below average today. So with respect to what's average or normal, quote unquote, we are running colder. And we are looking at a revisitation, perhaps the last one, of the polar vortex again for the first 3 weeks of March. So I do think that'll be winter's last hurrah. But with respect to what's average, and you've got to keep in mind, on March 1st, the average high temperature might be somewhere in the low 40s. And by the time we get to, say, March 15th or March 20th, the average high temperature may be in the middle 40s. It's increasing as the solar angle steepens and the days lengthen. But with respect to what's normal on any given day, that polar vortex is going to have us running considerably colder than what's normal for the date. So by the time we get to March 15th, we might say the high temperature today of 38. That does not sound cold at all, but for respect for what March 20th should be, like 48, we're running 10 degrees colder than average. So you can keep the snow threats going into the middle and later part of March with temperature regimes like that. And I think that's going to happen. But what I'll tell you about once I finish up on this climatology here is that we are looking at a milder week coming up next week. And I know, and I don't know how bad it is out in Torrington, Dan, but I know that many of my friends are talking about driveways that are like bobsled runs that are just and I have a great plow guy here. I mean, I have a great plow guy, but he told me his strategy with the last storm, when you go from significant snow, plowable amounts of snow, then you go to ice, then you go to rain, and then you get a flash freeze on top of that. I mean, you cannot. He said he was leaving down about an inch of snow. So he came when we got 4 inches of snow. He came when there was about 3.5 and plowed. And then he left it down. And I'm glad he did, because the snow absorbed the freezing rain and the rain somewhat. Then it froze into chunks, and I used my pitchfork out there to get under it and get the, I'm getting chunks of ice like this big on the pitchfork, and I just throw. Now that's another thing. I was out in the yard. My dog always brings his ball. He brought his ball and he put it on the snow, and it just started rolling, and it rolled right into the woods because the snow is so hard. It just has this crust on
Yep.
the top of it. So it's been wintry around here, no question. For the month of February, Dan, this will come as no shock to you. By the time we get through with today, February 21st, so in other words, the first 3 weeks of February, the normal high is 37.6. We're averaging 35.0. So we're averaging 2.5 degrees below average on the high temperature every day. The normal low at night is 19.9, so like right around 20, and that's what we're averaging at night. Sometimes the fact that we have cloud cover, it acts kind of as an insulating blanket, and it artificially keeps the temperature up a little bit. And we've had a whole lot of wind too. We've had a bad month in terms of wind chill, but that artificially keeps the temperature up too because it keeps the atmosphere mixed up. In terms of snow, we're right about exactly where we should be. By this time of the month, the 21st, we should have 11.5 inches of snow in February. We've had 11.3 so far. So that's kind of the Climo summary, Dan. Next week, I think I'll count up all the days of snow cover in December, all the days in January, all the days in February, and we'll see how many weeks of snow we had snow cover this winter.
That would be interesting. Now, speaking of snow, and we have a month left before spring arrives, and sometimes it could be the most dramatic month, and then you've got early spring snowstorms. Any snow threats on the horizon?
Yes, Dan, there is. I looked at the GFS and I looked at the European, and I want to tell you that I do not see an immediate threat, but rather so we get through this weekend. This weekend we're in the 30s. It's pretty nice out there. A little bit below average in terms of temperature, but I'll tell you what. This is a great winter for the skiers and the boarders. I was reading some article about at the stake in Mount Mansfield in Vermont where they measure, and a lot of the ski areas, big spots like Killington and Sugarloaf and Okemo and Mount Snow and everything. This looks like a top 10 winter for them in terms of snow accumulation. So the ski areas are doing great in terms of snowfall, but we've got nothing coming for about a week. So in terms of snow or anything appreciable, but by the time we get to next weekend, which would be Friday, February 28th, Saturday, March 1st, Sunday, March 2nd. Something's coming. And in terms of the 0Z GFS, so in other words, that was from 7 o'clock last evening. So that's the data I'm using. That's the most up-to-date data as we tape this. The prediction for next weekend from the GFS is for 6.9 inches of snow from that storm in Hartford, and 7.1 inches of snow from that storm in Waterbury. So, that would be a pretty good storm to end February and start the month of March. Now, that is with I want to differentiate here. We try to teach a little every week on the Bradfield Weather podcast. The first assumption is if you get an inch of water equivalent, you get 10 inches of snow. You move the decimal point. So you got for the first approximation, you've got a 10-to-1 ratio of water equivalent to snowfall. So you get an inch of liquid equivalent, you get 10 inches of snow. But Dan, that say you're getting this heavy wet snow where it's snowing like snow paste when it's 33, 34, 35 degrees and it's snowing like crazy and the flakes are big and they're wet. you can get an inch of water equivalent in only 3 or 4 inches of snow. So, they call that the heart attack snow, the heavy wet snow. Then on the other side of the coin, you get an inch of water equivalent when the temperature is, say, 18 for the snowstorm. You get this fluff. And 1 inch of water equivalent may go to 2 feet of snow. So this is called the Kuchera method. I don't know if you've ever heard that before, Dan. It takes into effect all the different parameters of what the air temperature is through the column of air as you go vertically, like straight above your head. So even though it could be cold at the ground, you may have factors as you go 1,000 feet up, 5,000 feet up, or whatever, that are impacting the snowflake as it falls toward the ground that can make it either very easy to accumulate or very hard to accumulate. So the Kuchera method takes into account these different temperatures at different layers of the atmosphere, the barometric pressure at different layers of the atmosphere. And I told you that next week we are looking for at that 10-to-1 ratio of about 7 inches, 6.9 in Hartford, 7.1 in Waterbury. But when you take into effect the Kuchera method of snowfall measurement, those same readings come to 9.8 in Hartford and 10.2 in Waterbury. So this is going to be in association with that polar vortex that I was talking about. So even though it's March and you might think that this Kuchera method would give us less snow, it would be heavy, wet slush. Not so. In this particular case, it looks more fluffy and more easy to accumulate. So instead of being around 7 inches, it may end up being around 10 inches. But of course, that's speculation. That's 8-9 days away, and we will have another Bradfield weather podcast before then. So I just thought that was interesting. Now, the European does not do the Kuchera method, but they give us about 3 inches next weekend. So let's just say the same things apply, that it's colder than what it should be through the column. That 3 might end up being like 5 or something like that. So I guess what I'm telling you is the modeling this morning is saying we may have something like a 5 to 10 inch snowfall to welcome the month of March. Okay. So we'll see. Right. I mean, it's 8-9 days away, and things change. I mean, this could end up being the winter of tremendous potential. A lot of gasoline flowing around, but no match, to make it blow up.
Well, there's still, again, as we said, entering the final month of winter, there's still plenty of winter left. As we know, this is the period where sometimes winter packs the most wallop, so it's not going away, that's for sure.
No, absolutely, Dan. I agree with you, and with the polar vortex as it's predicted to be, I think March will be a very, very busy month, at least the first 3 weeks of March.
Well, and we like to do the why of weather. Why is this polar vortex so gripping this winter? What's at play from an atmospheric standpoint?
Well, there's an event that I don't know a heck of a lot about, Dan, and I think a lot of these weather phenomenons are being studied, and let's go back 30 years. No one knew what ENSO neutral meant, and El Nino and La Nina, and how they impact our weather, even though it's happening half a globe away. There's something that's been under study recently called sudden stratospheric warming, and that occurs over the Arctic. Please don't ask me why, because I don't know how this occurs. But all of a sudden, at high levels of the atmosphere right over the Arctic, the stratosphere, starts warming at a tremendous rate. And for every yin in the atmosphere, there's a yang in the atmosphere. And what happens when we undergo one of these sudden stratospheric warming events is the mother lode, they call it, of the Arctic air breaks free and moves. So instead of being like just centered over the Arctic, it starts to ooze to the south. And if one of these pieces of that mother lode of Arctic air, because remember, up at the North Pole, it's dark constantly this time of year. So it gets colder and colder and cold. I mean, especially around December 21st, the winter solstice. I don't know how much sunlight they're getting now. It might be an hour or two, but when it's perpetually dark, it just keeps getting colder and colder and colder, and more ice forms and thicker ice forms and more snow accumulates and whatever, and the cold air develops over that and it starts to migrate. Now, if one of these break free and because of jet stream steering patterns moves down into the United States, the colloquial term that's being used on like CBS and NBC and ABC is the polar vortex. So, I mean, you know, we've kind of started to go along with it. Yeah, let's call it the polar vortex or whatever. But it does look like another one of these is going to set up over us. The stratospheric warming event has already occurred. And there's usually a 2-week lag before what happens with that finally gets down from the North Pole and impacts us. And like the old saying, it's always darkest before the dawn. It usually is always warmest right before the Arctic front. And next Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we're going to be in the 40s. Hallelujah. But then that's the warmest just before polar vortex comes in for the last few days of February and to go through the first few weeks of March.
Okay, so you're talking about temperature trends now. So what does it look like? We're looking at moderating temperatures next week? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely, Dan. As I said, this is going to be a great weekend for skiing. I mean, it'll be in the 20s today for the most part. Some of us down in Connecticut may get to 30, 31. Out toward Rhode Island, Cape Cod may get 31, 32, 33, something like that today. But then tomorrow, average high, let's say we're going to center it in Hartford. Looks like low 30s. Sunday looks like middle 30s. Monday looks like upper 30s. So you see the trend is for a slow warming of temperatures over the next few days. But we're still not back to normal even through Monday, because today the normal high is 40. And I'm predicting Monday 39. So, but then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, near or slightly above average. 44 on Tuesday, 45 on Wednesday, 46 on Thursday. I should stop right there because after Thursday, the polar vortex comes back. You're not going to want to hear this, Dan.
No.
33 on Friday, not so bad. 23 on Saturday. And Saturday is March the 1st.
Right.
So instead of being in the low 40s where it's supposed to be on March the 1st, we'll have a tough time getting out of the low to mid 20s.
Wow.
And then on Sunday, upper 20s. Then on Monday, March 3rd, low 30s. Tuesday, March 4th, upper 20s. This is really cold stuff. This is maybe an average of 15 degrees below average per day. And then to round out that whole first week of March, probably the 30s for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Wow. So a polar vortex visit for the last day or so of February and the first full week of March.
Brad, I had somebody ask me the other day, because this has been a cold winter and we've got heating bills to prove it, does that portend a warmer than normal summer?
I would say the short answer to that is no. But Dan, we always talk about the thermal balance,
Right.
and so yeah, I mean, when you look at someone's climate, and you take like the past couple of winters where we had, I don't know, less than 2 feet of snow, less than 2 feet of snow. If someone had moved to Connecticut and, had no idea about the climatology of this state, they might say, it doesn't snow that much here. But if you moved to Connecticut in the winter of 1995 and 1996, when we had 10 feet of snow at Bradley, you'd say, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? Why did I move to this place? It snows all the time. It's just a snapshot.
Right.
Just a snapshot.
Yeah.
But over time, you figure out, no, we don't usually get 10 feet of snow. No, we don't usually get 2 feet of snow. An average winter in Connecticut is 4 or 5 feet of snow, something like that. So it's the same thing with temperature, Dan. You have a cold winter, maybe a degree or two below average. That's cold, but it's really not an extremely cold. It just seems it because the last few winters have not been cold. So it's always with respect to what you're experiencing. I hate hot summers. So I'm hoping your question on its foundation is wrong. I hope it is. And I just signed up for my lawn service. They put down the various weed killers and stuff like that. I just signed up for it yesterday. So, and we're thinking about our baseball team at Granby High School. So my thought processes are spring, but I still think we have 4 more weeks of winter to go through.
Okay. Well, that said, we get to our On the Weather Map segment. And Brad, what does that look like on this February 21st?
Well, we can keep it short and sweet, Dan, because it's boring as can be. It's all about one high pressure system that today is located over western Kentucky, clockwise around the high. So we get a northerly flow, and that's why it's cold again today in the 20s to right around 30. By tomorrow, the high is centered more toward Virginia, North Carolina, more toward our longitude. So when you wake up tomorrow morning, there might not be much in the way of wind, and that is going to lead to some cold temperatures. And at Bradley, the low for the month, Dan, believe it or not, is 10. I mean, January was much colder when we had the 2 sub-zero days in a row there. But tomorrow, Saturday, February 22nd, may end up being the coldest morning of the month because the combination of clear sky, which we haven't had much of, we've had a lot of cloud cover, slackening wind, and snow cover, fairly deep snow cover, could yield temperatures down into the single digits tomorrow morning, Dan. So it could be the coldest morning of the month thus far. Sunday, the high is stretched out from Canada to the Carolinas. So we're right under the high pressure ridge. It's sunny. It's not much wind. It's in the 30s. So that's why I said it's going to be a great day for skiing. And I remember the days that I was skiing. You would sit on the chairlift going up on these days and without much wind and in the 30s and the strong late February sun, March sun. You could shut your eyes and think you're at the beach. So that's the experience the skiers will enjoy this weekend. By Monday, we'll have low pressure moving into Lake Superior. Now, the high is moving off the shore, and the low is advancing. So it's clockwise around the low, counterclockwise around the low, clockwise around the high. So we are going to get southwesterly winds starting on Monday, the reason for the warm-up. The flow will be more enhanced on Tuesday, thus we'll get temperatures up into the 40s. That low will move into the eastern Great Lakes. And as the warm air advects into Connecticut, I wouldn't be surprised to see a few rain showers, but not a big deal, not a big storm. Wednesday, we start with cold front number 1, but it's not going to be really cold behind the cold front, just sort of a wind shift from southwest to northwest, but temperatures will still stay up into the 40s. By Thursday, that Arctic front from that polar vortex that I'm talking about will be entering upstate New York. Now, before it gets here, next Thursday, when we're doing our next podcast, or maybe next Friday we'll be doing it, I don't know, but it will still be mild on Thursday, but by Friday, the cold front has passed. The Arctic cold front has passed. Low 30s at best for the last day of February, February 28th, setting the stage for the next snow threat, which will be either Friday, February 28th, or the first weekend of March, March 1st and 2nd. So that's the next snow threat. And remember, we did all the analysis of the GFS and the European and that Kuchera method or whatever, predicting something like several inches of snow, 5 to 9, 5 to 10, something like that. So that's the next snow threat.
And obviously, as you mentioned, either Thursday or Friday, we will fine-tune that forecast. But as we put a wrap on this podcast, what does our immediate forecast look like?
All right, it's a beautiful day today, Dan. It's sunny, and it's 28 to 34. Tonight, it's going to be clear and cold, perhaps the coldest night of the month. Temperatures averaging between 6 and 12. I mean, some of the Goshens and Colebrookes of the world could be down near 0. Saturday looks sunny and in the 30s. Sunday looks sunny, 36 to 42. How do you like that? Monday, mostly cloudy, temperature 38 to 44. Tuesday, a couple showers around with the warm front, temperatures moving up into the 40s. Wednesday, some sun, temperatures in the 40s. Thursday, the Arctic front passes through, rain showers changing to snow showers, falling temperatures, and then a storm threat for next Friday and the weekend.
All right, and we'll keep an eye on that, obviously, and fine-tune it next week. That said, Brad, to you and Sandy and our podcast and radio audiences, be safe, be well, and we'll talk soon, my friend.
All right, Dan, to my very best to you and Susan and to all our loyal listeners and viewers.
Thanks, Brad. Our 200th episode. And the Brad Field Weather Podcast has been underwritten by Action Carpet and Floor Covering of Simsbury, a family-run business built for you, and by McAllen Construction. McAllen Construction, from the first dig to the last nail. Be well, everybody. All right, my friend, can I get you to do a WAPJ beginning with tomorrow morning?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome.
All right, coming up in 3, 2, 1. Bundle up out there this morning. I'm WAPJ meteorologist Brad Field. I'm going to turn this volume down here, Dan. I won't hear you very much, but I won't hear the feedback either. Coming up in 3, 2, 1. Bundle up out there this morning. I'm WAPJ meteorologist Brad Field. It is cold out there with temperatures averaging in the single digits, but today, under powerful late February sun, temperatures will move on up into the 30s. Overnight tonight, it will be clear and cold, temperatures between 5 and 15. For tomorrow, Sunday, it'll be sunny, Temperatures on average between 35 and 40. On Monday, a mostly cloudy day, and it looks like a milder week coming up. Temperatures on Monday between the upper 30s and the lower 40s. Tuesday, a couple of showers around in the 40s, and Wednesday, sunny with temperatures in the 40s.
All right. That's